Hey, so good to have you here. We are in for a bit of a treat. I'm really, really excited, as I said on the video, about this opportunity to bring this message over the next 4 out of the next 5 weeks. So next week will be a week off from me. We're going to hear from 3 gentlemen next week, 3 guys. They're going to share the word between them. It's going to be fantastic. So that'll be next Sunday, and then the 3 Sundays after that, to round out June, we will finish this message called Dollars and Cents. So you probably got a little booklet near you somewhere on your seat that the guys in the team left out for you. I want to encourage you to bring that with you, put it in your handbag or your man bag. Nelson, do you like man bags, Nelson? I know your father doesn't. He's got a bag fetish, but for some reason he doesn't like man bags. He likes every other bag, but he doesn't like man bags. So whatever you want to do, take it, keep it with you, bring it back each week. It's just like a series of basically main points that we're going to make during the course of the next 4 sessions. So I'll be talking to that a little bit as we go along. There's plenty of blank pages in there where you can jot down notes if you want to. We're actually going to film this series. Nick's up the back on the camera. We're actually recording it as well as producing it for the creche area, because I thought this is the kind of stuff that I think we want to have as a resource for people who want to know how to handle their finance as well. So as I said, I'm really excited. I don't presume in any way to be an expert on the area of money. There are some, looking around the room, there are a few accountants in the room. There are a few people that know a lot more about finances and are probably in a much healthier place financially than we are. But I have learned a few things along the way, and so I want to really kind of be like a fellow journey with you together into a place where we can discover what God has to say in the Bible about financial management. Does that make sense? Zig Ziglar. Who's heard of Zig Ziglar? Anybody? Passed away just a few months ago. Renowned for being a primary voice on financial management, business life, to the Christian church and to the secular world. And he tells a story. I've heard him say this a couple of times, actually. He tells this story, which I thought was very applicable as we begin. He tells a story of a young investment banker who was interviewing a retiring, successful investment banker as he was beginning his career. And he said, so wanting to start off on the right foot, the young man entered the office of the older gentleman and asked him for advice. What is the secret to your success? The older man gruffly said, 2 words, good decisions. The younger man, somewhat puzzled, asked, and how can I be sure I can make good decisions? The older man promptly replied, that's easy, 1 word, experience. Thank you, sir, the young man hesitantly stated as he posed another question. And how does one get this experience? Oh, that's simple, the old man quipped. 2 words, bad decisions. Isn't that true? Isn't that a picture of life? We make so many mistakes. The question is, do we learn from our mistakes, or do we fail and then stay as a failure? Because I believe that as Christians, as believers in God, we can fail, but we can get back up again. In fact, the book of Proverbs, as one of its proverbs, it says, a righteous man may fall 7 times, but he will get back up again. Whether you've failed or not, especially in this area of finances, does not mean that it's the end of the road for you. You can get back up again. You can get back up again. You can begin to apply the principles that we're going to unpack. I'm really going to scratch the surface today. I want to leave you kind of itching to come back and hear more. I certainly can't cover it all. In fact, I can't even cover everything I want to say in 4 preaching sermons. We're going to have a whole host of other things that I want to accompany this. I'm going to put up on a blog. I'm going to have a video blog up by the end of the week, and we'll probably add to that with some other tools that you guys can grab a hold of and lay a hold of. And then probably sometime in July, we'll get some of our financial experts, our accountants and our business guys together, and we'll probably do a seminar where we can get you guys to come along maybe one night of the week and have a couple of hours and begin to get into some more nitty-gritty of how to do financial management. So let me tell you a little bit about our story. I'm going to be quite open here because I want you to know, really from the outset, that I am not posing myself as an expert. I'm not posing myself as somebody who has it all together financially. I've made lots of mistakes. We've made lots of mistakes. But we've learned some things along the way too. And hopefully some of those things that I've learned I can share with you guys. I look around the room and I can see different ones of you that I know have had various different battles financially. And I want you to know that that's okay. Okay, you're not alone. the vast majority of people. In fact, I did sort of a head count at Wallandilly this morning as I was preaching. If my voice is a bit raspy, it's because I was competing with torrential rain on a tin roof, 260 square feet of tin roof this morning. I could not hear myself preach, let alone anything else, even with a microphone. So, but I looked across the room, it's probably just a few more people than here, and I looked around and I could only pinpoint sort of 2 or 3 couples that I could say with any certainty, these guys are actually in a good place financially. You know, where they're actually making some significant progress. And it will be largely the same here. There'll be all kinds of various different situations, but some people are struggling more than others. But I want you to know you're not alone. The whole purpose of this message, this series, is that together we can make some progress towards financial success. So a little bit about our story. We were married when we were 19 years of age, very young to be married, even in the day we were. It's even younger now because people don't get married until they're well into their 30s a lot of the time. We were married very young. We both had incomes. I'd been working for the sum total of 1.5 months, 6 weeks of full-time employment when we got married. I had to say to my employer, I'm going on my honeymoon for a week, is that okay? And they let me go. 6 weeks, so I was an expert at earning full-time income. Jill had been working for, I suppose, 18 months full-time, maybe a bit more than that at that time. And we had 2 incomes. And we were doing what we thought was reasonably well on our 2 massive incomes, which probably between the 2 of us maybe totaled, I don't know, maybe $65,000 between the 2 of us. I don't really know. It wouldn't have been much more than that. Probably not even that much. We're probably earning 25 to 30 each, something like that, I guess. So we had a massive income. But we got to the point where our parents said, look, you really should buy a house. It's important to buy a house. You've got to have your own house. We've been renting a little flat. And so our parents sort of pushed us, well-meaning, pushed us to the bank. We went to the bank and we borrowed our deposit. We borrowed our mortgage. And we had about $5,000 to put towards it that we'd saved. And so we bought our very first house, a 3-bedroom house, for the grand total of $111,000. You can't even buy a car for $111,000 these days. $111,000, and we were in the housing market. We owned this house, and things were going okay. Not long after that, Amy was born. She was actually pregnant. Jill was pregnant with Amy at the time we got this house, and so we very quickly went from about $60,000 a year down to, I suppose, about $30,000 a year. And it wasn't long before we couldn't make the repayments on our house that were $800 a month. $200 a week was our mortgage repayments. I look back now and think, my goodness me. But we were struggling to make ends meet paying our $200 a week. And so we very quickly got ourselves into some financial trouble. And we knew nothing. We were very green, very young. And we went to see my parents' accountant, and he kind of introduced to us, even right back then, some of the principles of budgeting. I know the moment I say the word budgeting, lots of people begin to twitch, freak out. So I said to the guys at Picton this morning, if you don't like the word budgeting, just use the word spending plan. It might make it sound a bit more comforting. But he taught us some of the principles of budgeting. And I'd like to be able to say that we've done that all the way through, but we haven't. But I do know that if we had have been able to do all the way through what he had taught us, we would not be still trying to dig ourselves out of a hole that we are today. So let me tell you a bit about ourselves. So after that, we ticked along okay. In about 1998, I went part-time in our church in Canberra on staff, and we went and I was working part-time in my employer as well, and we were doing okay. There was a period of about 18 months where we were quite financial, and we let various different people live in our house. We were renting another house, and we said we want to be generous, so we let people live in our house and pay like $50 a week rent. I think someone might have even lived there for nothing for a while, and we let them live there for nothing, and we had the money to cover the mortgage and all that. And it seemed generous, but in hindsight, it was quite foolish because we weren't really in a place financially to do that. And then when we felt the call to move to Sydney at the end of 1999, we wrapped up in the last few months, and I remember talking to Brian and Rosalie at the time. We came and met them. We decided we'd move up here. We thought we'd put our house on the market and it would sell. And so we put the house on the market in October, and it did sell, almost sold anyway. I think the price, we actually sold it for about $100,000. Well, it went on the market and we had a buyer for about $100,000. The market price had actually plummeted in that period of time. The bottom had fallen out of the market. And so just before we moved, just before Christmas, the house was going to sell, and it was like a week before Christmas, and they rang us and said, hey, the buyer's pulled out. So we moved up here, and we went from one income to no incomes. I went back to Austudy, so we were supporting 3 children on a Centrelink payment while I was studying. And our house did not sell, was empty, and it did not sell until the end of April that year. And it sold for $85,000. So it had lost, over that period of time, we had lost $30-something thousand. And we had intended that we would get some equity out of that house and we would be able to use that to support us through college. As it was, we ended up in a very significant financial strain, and we're still recovering to this day. We're in a process of recovery, but we're still recovering. Between about 2001 and 2006, we got into the vicious cycle that I know some of you have been in, where you max out your credit card. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Maxed out our credit card. Now, we did that 3 times. And what had happened was, if anyone's had a credit card, they know the bank they don't worry about whether or not you can afford it. They just love to they notice your credit card's maxed out and you've gone over a few times. They let it go. They charge you with a fee. And then, lo and behold, in the mail comes a letter that says, hey, would you like to increase your credit limit by another $3,500? Well, we increased our credit limit up to $50,000. We had a $50,000 credit card. And over that period of time of 5 years, we went through a process of maxing out our credit card, wiping the credit card, getting a personal loan, and then maxing out the credit card again. And then wiping that, reconsolidating the personal loan, which was now higher, maxing out the credit card. The 3rd time, in 2006, it really hit, and the pressure was very strong. I was incredibly stressed by the fact that we could not make ends meet. I actually kept a lot of this from Jill. I don't know if any of your husbands know what I'm talking about, but wanting to protect your wife from the worries and the pressures of financial management. And so Jill probably wasn't even aware of how serious things were at this time. And so I was losing a lot of sleep over that, and I went through a process. We eventually went and saw a financial planner in the Sutherland Shire, and his advice wasn't really comforting. He basically said, you've got 2 choices, go bankrupt or borrow money from your father. That was where he was at. And so we were quite discouraged by all that. But all the while during this time, God was telling me, Rohan, if you'll do something, I'll do something. If you will actually stop burying your head in the sand and hoping this problem goes away, God will do something. And so we made the decision we were able to refinance the final time, and the 3rd time we did that, we cut our credit card up. We said, we're not doing that again. To this day, we've not had another credit card. We don't have one. We have MasterCard debit card, but no actual credit card. We don't live on credit. We still have a large personal loan that we are still making progress on and paying off. Now, I'd like to be able to say, hey, I'm debt-free, but we're not. But we now know that despite the fact we're still paying off debt, we can sleep at night because we're making progress. We're moving in the right direction. It's going to take time, but at least I know that I'm making progress. And if I had have known now had I known back then what I know now, we would be a lot further along than we are. But unfortunately, bad decisions brings experience. You know what I'm talking about? And it took me 3 times of bad decisions before we finally woke up to it. Quit burying our head in the sand and did something about it. And we've been making progress. And then, of course, God sovereignly, supernaturally provided us with the opportunity to purchase a house, which we couldn't have done. I mean, we didn't have any access to a first homeowners grant. We'd already owned a home. But Jill saw it just basically driving through Narellan and saw the sign Wisdom Homes and said, I'm going to go in there. And this is back before Wisdom Homes was a major supplier of homes like they are today. We dealt directly with the manager, the owner, and he helped us out, and we were able to get a house when we really didn't think there was any chance of that. And so God has been faithful to us as we have applied some principles. But the bottom line of this series, and my driving force behind why I want to preach this series, is because I look back on the pressure and the stress that I was under 6 or 7 years ago. And I don't want people to go through with that. I don't want people to live there. I don't believe we need to live there. I believe it's possible to get to a point where money isn't such a pressure on us. That doesn't mean you have to be abundant and have heaps and heaps of money coming out everywhere. You can actually get to the point where we're still, tens of thousands of dollars in debt, making our way forward. But that said, the pressure is off. I'd love to be able to say, hey, we're debt-free tomorrow, but we're not. But I don't live with that stress and that burden because I know I've now been able to get a spending plan together. We now know what we can spend, what we can't spend, and we're making progress. And I've seen time and time again, having worked in community services for 5 years, I've seen time and time again that when we do our part, God will do his part. Does that make sense? When we make some decisions and say, I'm going to quit burying my head in the sand and hope this problem goes away. I'm talking to the guys, when you man up and say, I'm going to do something about this, God supernaturally will come in. So some of you don't know what I'm talking about. You're young and you haven't had this trouble yet. Hopefully I can prevent some of that from happening. You guys can launch off our shoulders and not make the mistakes we've made. But if you are making those mistakes or you have made those mistakes, then come to this series with a hungry heart to learn and change and say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make some difference. And I can't wave a magic wand. We can't have an altar call and suddenly everything will fix. Now, God can do that. But my experience is most times he doesn't. Most times he doesn't. And Rosalie's been a CAP worker for a long time, and so she can testify how lots of times what happens is people get into CAP, they start to make some plans and start to set aside a budget and start to pay off their debt, and then God says, right, now that you're doing that part, I'll do my part. And we've heard testimonies of people like their debt's been cut in half. The bank's just said, okay, look, we'll cut your debt from $40,000 to $20,000. But so often, I think it waits, that supernatural provision waits, and God says, hey, you do your part, then I'll show up. And you know why I think that is? Because I think he knows that if he just does it all, and we don't change our spending plan and our lifestyle, we'll just get ourselves right back in the mess again. And that's not a good, wise use of God's resources. Are you with me? So I don't know where you're at. I know where some of you are at, but I know that if you'll come to this series with an open heart and say, hey, Rohan, you're not the guru, but you're my pastor and you know some things. You've learned some things, you've studied some things, you're there for me. You want to hear my heart on that. I believe it's going to do you good. Amen? I'm really, really passionate about that happening. So, as a point of starting for this message, it's important that we come to God. We have to come to the Bible and say, well, what does the Bible have to say about money? What does God have to say about money? And any time we talk about money in the church, people always get a little bit antsy. You hear things like, oh, they just want your money. They just want your bum on a seat and they just want your tithe in a bucket and that's all they want. And I have to say, unfortunately, rather than blaming the world for thinking that, maybe we've got to be a little bit introspective and look at ourselves and say, hey, have we as Christians sent that message? Have we not preached the whole message? And as a result, people have got the wrong intention. Maybe people in the world, maybe other churches have got the wrong intention. And so what happens is that as a result of that, you end up with two extremes when it comes to the issue of money in the Christian church. The first one is there's an overemphasis on money, or particularly an overemphasis on material blessing. You've heard the words name it and claim it probably, or blab it and grab it. In other words, you just give to God, God will just provide you with everything. And that kind of has stained the church, the traditional televangelist kind of mentality. That has stained the church. Not that they've necessarily been wrong, but the way it's been interpreted is wrong. And I want to kind of pare it all back a little bit and come away from that. And even the term, the prosperity gospel, because people say, oh, I don't like that prosperity gospel stuff. Well, that's unfortunate because the Bible is about prosperity. It says in 1 John, I think it's chapter 1, it says, beloved children, I would pray that you prosper even as your soul prospers. The Bible talks about prosperity a lot. It says if you do God's will, he will prosper in all you do. God wants us to prosper. He wants us to be prospered in all areas of our life, our health, our relationships, and our money. That's his intention. But the problem is when the messages come across without being complete, it's led to this belief that the prosperity gospel is all about just give to God and he'll take care of the rest. And so here's some things I wrote down that kind of sayings that get thrown around the church. Oh, if you just pay your tithe, if you just pay your 10%, God will look after you and he'll take care of the rest. Just pay your tithe. And maybe you heard other people say, well, I can't afford to tithe. And I've heard Christians say, well, actually, you can't afford not to tithe. Now, I've been guilty of saying that. But do you know what? When I took a step back as I was preparing this message, I realised actually lots of people can't afford to tithe. Actually, if they continue with their current lifestyle, they can't afford to give 10% to God. And just to say, hey, just start tithing and God will take care of the rest, that is not the full gospel. Because God has something to say about the 100%, not just 10%. God speaks about it all. And we're going to unpack all of that in the next several weeks. So we have this first extreme where it's a focus on material blessing. And if you just give, God will take care of the rest. And if you're not giving, then you're not blessed, etc. And then almost to kind of get away from that, we've got an extreme on the other side, which is that people say, well, I don't want to be named in the prosperity gospel crowd. I don't want to be named in that side, so I'm not going to talk about money at all. We just won't talk about money. We'll just avoid the issue. We won't even have a giving talk every week. We'll just kind of sussily hand the tray around and hoping that someone will put it in, but we won't deal with money at all. And do you know what? That's actually just as bad as this side. Because I'm going to take my cue from Jesus. It's a good place to take your cue from. Do you know Jesus talked about money a lot? A lot. Jesus talked about money more than any topic other than the kingdom of heaven. It's the only topic he talked about more than money. We're going to look at some of those scriptures and verses as we move on. Money was a big deal to Jesus. In fact, most of the time when he talked about money, it was in the context of the kingdom of heaven. He linked money to spirituality. He explained to us that the way we handle money affects our spirituality. The two are inextricably linked to each other. See, money management and the way you handle money is not just a financial issue. It's actually a Christian issue. It's a discipleship issue. It is a spiritual maturity issue. Now, hear me right. I'm not saying that means that if you're rich and you have money that you're more spiritual than if you're poor. That's not what I'm saying. It's about your attitude toward money, your handling of what you have been entrusted with. You know the parable of the talents? Jesus told the story, and the guy who had 2 talents and faithfully looked after those 2 talents was treated just as well as the guy who had 5 talents and faithfully looked after them. The question is, your spiritual maturity is dictated by what is your attitude and how do you handle the money that you have, be it little or much. In fact, your contentment has nothing to do with how much money you have. The Apostle Paul was in prison in the book of Philippians, and he said, I've learned the secret. Actually, I'll back up a bit. He says, I have lived with a heap and I've lived with a little. He says, I've known what it's like to have lots and I've known what it's like to have little. And I've learned the secret of contentment in both. He says, it's actually got nothing to do with money. I can be content whether I've got a lot or I can be content whether I've got a little. The contentment comes from Jesus. I've learned the secret of contentment because I have a relationship with Jesus. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Nick, I wonder if we could have that first verse, Luke 16:11, up on the screen behind me. Therefore, if you have not been faithful with unrighteous mammon, who will commit to you true riches? This is the words of Jesus. If you have not been faithful with unrighteous mammon, who will commit to you true riches? The first thing I want to talk about is this word mammon. Mammon is money, but it means more than money. The Greek word actually talks about the world system. The definition is material wealth and greed. It's talking about the world structure when it comes to money. Not God's kingdom, but the world structure. But for the sake of making sense in this context, think about it as money and our attitude toward money more than just money itself. See, money is not evil. And I'm going to come to that in the next verse. Money is not evil, but our attitude toward money dictates whether it's evil or not. So think of it that way. And here's the point. Jesus is saying, hey, if you're not faithful with this stuff, then who's going to trust you with this stuff? True riches. Doesn't that show us that if Jesus is saying that there's riches which are more true and more important than money, there's something that is available to us which is more important than money. And yet, our world system, our world structure, everything points us to it's all about money, don't they? Everything on television, all our media is pointing us to money is there. If you have money, you'll be happy. Jesus is saying, hey, money will not make you happy. If you want true riches, which is where the happiness lies, you have to be faithful with money. That is the requirement. See, the two are inextricably linked. He equates how we deal with money to our spiritual health. You with me? Our health of our spiritual life is dictated by our attitude toward money. And so, if you're in a financial bind, if you're facing some financial struggles, perhaps you're about to drop to one income. I'm looking at Keith and Michelle. Michelle's going to be having a baby soon. Kim and Justin have just dropped to one income with the birth of their little baby. So that's a tough time. That's a difficult time. And if you can get to the point where you go, I am determined, I am going to be faithful with what God has entrusted me with, then your spiritual life can actually go ahead, not go backwards. It's a fact, money will compete with God for lordship in your life. There's actually it's probably the primary thing that will fight against you. It's like money is on a mission. And the reason is, this word mammon here, has anyone ever heard the term the spirit of mammon? the Bible talks about the spirit of mammon. And this might sound a bit strange for some of you, but there are demonic forces at work in our world. Jesus makes it very clear. He believed in them. And the devil will attack money, and he will attack your attitude toward money. Can you see why? It's because of that very verse. See, if he can change your attitude towards unrighteous mammon and towards money, then that has the potential to rob you of true riches. And so there's a spiritual force at work that hates God and hates you, that wants to force you to have a wrong attitude toward money. Money is not bad, but our attitude towards it determines whether it's good or bad, whether it becomes a productive or a destructive thing in our life. And so the spirit of mammon is at work in the world system, and it will fight against you because it knows, the enemy knows that if he can get you with a wrong attitude toward money, then he can rob you of true riches. He can rob you of true joy. The next verse, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, says, no one can... Is that the next one? Have I got the right one? Yes. Is that Matthew 6? Go back to 1 Timothy 6, verse 10. Is that there? That's the one we're after. 1 Timothy 6, verse 10. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through many sorrows. This is a Bible verse that's often quoted by people who don't even know the Bible. You know, you might have heard people say, money's the root of all evil. Have you heard people say that over the years? That's not what Paul was saying. What was he saying? What about money was the root of all kinds of evil? The love of money. See, money, I haven't got my wallet here, it's down there. You pass me my wallet up, it's in my bag down there. It's in my bag underneath. Just throw my wallet up, that's fine. Thanks, Phil. Thank you, sir. So here's a $20 note. Now this isn't evil. This is just paper. It's just plastic. I suppose there's a better word to say. It's just plastic, right? It's not good or bad. It's not a root of all evil. But if I love this money, then it has the potential to be very destructive in my life. It has the potential to rob me of all kinds of joy. It says, many have strayed from the faith in their greediness and have pierced themselves with many sorrows. It's not just about piercing other people. If you have a love of money, it can bring great sorrow to your own life, to your own family's life. That's why we're on a mission through this series, to make sure that we do everything we can to have not a love of money. You can keep that $20 just for being a nice person, Phil. Take it out. That's coming out of my portion, not Jill's portion. I'm giving that to Phil. So the love of money is the issue. And if we love money, it can be incredibly destructive in our world. Now let's put the next one up. Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. This is Jesus' words, showing us that we're in a battle. He says, none of you can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon. Can't be any clearer than that. If you are serving money, if you are serving money, if you have a love of money issue, if money has an unright place in your life, then you can't serve God. You can say, I love God and I love God, but I'm living like it's all for me. Then your love is, Jesus is saying, you're deceiving yourself. You actually don't love God. It's impossible to love God and love mammon. See, money can either serve us or we can serve money. There's the issue. And the devil will do everything he can to make you serve money. When money becomes your master, like it said in the previous verse, all kinds of sorrows come about. But money's not bad. And this is what happens. People talk on money, and then the church talks on money, and then people think the church wants your money, so we won't talk about money. And then money gets put aside as an aside. Money isn't bad. Most people I've found in the world, when you talk to them, they understand it takes money to run a church. Most people are business people. They know, well, you've got to pay the pastors, you've got to pay the bills. Most people don't have a problem with that. It's just that the church has not done a good job, by and large, of explaining that the situation isn't that we just want your money. The situation is that it's normal to contribute to a family. It's a normal part of life to contribute to the house that you're part of. So the issue is, do we love money or not? I wonder if we could have that baptism picture, because this sort of illustrates a point here. I'll step over to the side. I wonder how many people, when they get baptised, say, God, you can have my life, but you can't have my wallet. They might not say that, but lots of us live that way. Lots of us live like we want to keep our wallet above the surface. You can have the rest of me, God, but my money, don't touch my money, God, that belongs to me. In the Middle Ages, the Crusaders, when they were employed by the church to fight against the hordes of the Islam that were making their way through northern Africa, they were employed out of the funds of the church. And the church said, look, you need to be baptised in order to fight for the church. And so there was tens and tens of thousands of people baptised. But these crusaders, these soldiers, when they were baptised, they held their sword above the water as they were baptised. As if to say, you can have the rest of me, but my sword, I can be as bloodthirsty as I want to be with that. I can be filled with vengeance and hate as much as I want. Money is just as destructive. We need to bury our money when we're baptised. When we come to God, we have to say, God, it all belongs to you. I want to make use of all of it for your glory. And that's where true riches comes from. If we have the right attitude toward money, true riches comes from that. Amen? So the topic of today's today's message is money matters. And it does. I want you to go away from today knowing that money is important. If you've been burying your head in the sand, it's time to get your head out of the sand and realise that money matters. It matters more than you think. Because Jesus says the way you handle money is an indicator. It's like a barometer of your spiritual health. The attitude you have towards money dictates your spiritual journey. Money matters to you. Money matters to God. Money matters to your family. If you have money and you have the right attitude toward money, it can be an incredibly liberating thing. But with the wrong attitude, it can be incredibly destructive. Many people struggle in silence and they won't talk about it. I'm on a mission to help you talk about it. Get it out in the open and deal with it and say, hey, I'm going to get myself get my right attitude toward money and start to deal with it. And the world is fighting against that, left, right and centre. I talked about how we got credit card invites all the time saying, get this, get that. Well, Amy's had a credit card since she was about 16, maybe 15 or 16 when she got her first job. Sorry, credit card. She got a bank account. She had an ANZ bank account when she got her first job. And it was a student bank account. And then I told you the story about how she said recently, she texted me and said, hey, Dad, I need to get some stuff at uni, out of the uni, some textbooks, but don't worry, I've got your card. I'll pay for it on your card. And so as a result of that, I said, hey, it's time you got your own debit card, Amy. So Amy went to the bank and went into ANZ. Have you got your card now, or are you still waiting for it? Still waiting for it. Yeah, that's a long time. We better follow that up. She went to the bank a couple of weeks ago. She probably has got it, but she hasn't told me because she wants to keep using mine. So Amy went to get her debit card, and in the space of a week after she went to the bank, it was like suddenly it hit some unknown radar at the banks, and they said, oh, this girl's after a debit card. Let's invite her to have a credit card. In the space of a week, she got four, not two, four. Oh, there you go. I thought it was two. 4 invitations to get credit cards. 20-year-old uni student is being bombarded with invitations for credit cards. Yeah, you just need you need $2,500, take it. Can you see how this world system is bombarding? It's warring against us. It's trying to get us at the youngest age we possibly can into the mess that we got ourselves into, and I don't want that to happen. So what are my goals? I want us to get to the point where we have a right attitude towards it, where we can help as many people as possible get out of the cycle of spending more than you're earning, get out of the cycle of worrying and stressing about money. Just think for a moment in your own mind, how much time do you spend on money-related stuff? How much time do you spend worrying about making ends meet? Will I have enough money? How much? It's not just time, it's emotional capacity. You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes you don't spend a lot of time on it, but it's incredibly draining. Can I make ends meet? How will I pay this bill? Can I pay this bill this week and that one next week? How much time do you spend? How much emotional capacity do you spend? Well, if we apply the Bible principles that God has put in place that are thousands of years old, but guess what? They still work. They're just as applicable today as when they were written. They're not antiquated. They're not outdated. You think the world knows better? No, the world doesn't know better. We're going to show you some statistics on that in a few weeks' time. If we apply God's principles, it's possible to get to the point where, and this is my mission, regardless of whether you have a lot or a little, regardless of whether you're in debt or you're out of debt, it is possible to get to the point where you can live without stress, where you can actually be making progress financially. And here's the deal when it comes to giving. My experience is far more people, or put it this way, most people aren't opposed to giving. most people aren't opposed to being a generous person, giving to the church and giving to other people and other causes and whatever. Most people aren't opposed to it. Far more often, the issue is people don't think they can. They don't feel free enough to do that. They don't have space in their finances to be as generous as they would like to be. Most people aren't opposed to it. When we stand up and talk about the principles of tithing, what the Bible teaches about the principle of being generous and giving 10% as a minimum kind of principle. I'm going to talk about that probably in week 3, so that'll be the 23rd or something like that. I'm going to talk about that and unpack that very clearly. Most people aren't opposed to that. They just say, I just don't feel like I can because there's too much else. There's too much other pressure. Well, I'm going to pare it all back because lots of churches just focus on that. I'm going to come back, and my mission is to help you get to the point where you can be free enough. Eventually, where you can be as generous as you want to be, as you desire to be. Are you with me? I said last week, I sort of took a leaf out of Andy Stanley's series of messages he's preached on financial management. And he's kind of set it a simple catchphrase goal. He calls it the 10-10-80 principle. He says, as a church, he wants to get his church into a position where we're moving towards being able to give 10%, save 10%, live on 80%. I think it makes a lot of sense. Be generous with 10%, save 10%, live on 80%. And I'll unpack that in a bit more depth. Some of you will go, I can't give 10%. Some of you will go, I can't save 10%. We can't save 10%. We're not at that point yet. But let's begin a journey towards a place that is much freer financially and much freer emotionally. You with me? So I wonder if you'd open up your little booklet there, and you're only going to get as much out of this as you're prepared to put into it. It's I said this morning, it's kind of like you're not going to get fit by watching Aerobics Oz Style on the television. And saying, if I just watch enough episodes of Aerobics Oz Style, I'm going to lose my weight. No, it's not going to work. Has anyone tried that? It's not going to happen. Well, you're not going to get financially free. Has anyone not got a copy of that? Anyone not got a copy? There's a few around. Could we grab some more of those? Are they around somewhere up the back? Let's try and get copies for people. That would be great. They're around somewhere. Even if you share one between two. Now, could you pass that one back? Has anyone still not got one? Stacey hasn't got one up the back on the other side, so do the frisbee throw over to that side. Phil's going to take it over. There you go, he's earning his $20. So, you're not going to get wherever you're at financially, but wherever you are, whether you've got plenty or you feel like you're on top of your finances or not, you can always improve. But wherever you are, you're not going to get any improvement by listening to 4 sermons. I mean, I'm literally scratching the surface. In 4 sermons, I don't have time to unpack it in any depth, and that's why we're going to do some blogs. I'm going to talk to some of the fellows about putting together some seminars and so on to help us as a church begin the journey towards financial freedom and financial stressless living. But I want you to start with a couple of things. I want you to, first of all, set some goals for yourself. And so inside of about the third page in, you'll see on the bottom right corner, just some simple things for you to start to think about. Some goals for either you as an individual or you as a couple if you're married or you've got a partner. So some simple things. And this is just to basically jog your thinking. But maybe say, I want to pay off or erase a certain amount of money off my debt. If you're $30,000 in debt, it's a bit unreasonable for most of you to say, I'm going to be out of debt by the end of the year. Most people don't have $30,000 lying around that they can do that. So basically, use a bit of gut feeling and set some goals. Say, hey, if I could just pay off my payment plus an extra couple of $1,000s, this year I could find another couple of thousand, whatever it might be. Begin to make some steps towards freedom by a certain date. Maybe you've never been on a holiday and you want to go on a holiday. This time next year you want to take your family away. Families, you've got to go on holidays. I've got 34 days until my holiday. I'm counting down the days. I'll tell you, I'm counting them down. 34 days. But you've got to take your family on a holiday. And so maybe set some money and say, I'm going to save some money, save $3,000 so I can take my family on a week's holiday to Gold Coast. I don't know what it might be. Everybody's different, okay? But set some goals for yourself. I want to increase my giving by a certain percentage. You say, well, actually, if some weeks I tithe, some weeks I don't. And just set yourself a goal. Don't come at it with a perspective of, I just feel the pressure, I need to start tithing. Maybe if you add it all up, you're giving 4%. Why don't you say, hey, I'd like to make some progress and move towards a point where if I added up how much I was giving, it was 7%. And then later on, you'll get to a position where you can go further. So that's kind of the first thing to do, to set yourself some goals. Talk about it. Go away and talk about it. And the other bit of homework is I want you to go away and begin. Let me show of hands. How many people actually have a spending plan or a budget that actually use it? Wow, that's impressive. That's actually very impressive. That you guys are well above level. The reason I said and actually use it is because lots of people have a spending plan, but they don't actually take any notice of where it's up to. There's a few around like that, right? So that's you guys are doing well. That's a great start. That is actually a phenomenal start. I'm encouraged by that already. Okay, I want to help the rest of you, and maybe those that are there, to begin to make even more progress towards an effective spending plan. And so in the middle of this book, right in the middle, is like a spread, a two-page spread there that just kind of has some ideas to get you thinking. I'm not going to teach you in any of these messages how to run a budget. I'm actually going to do that on some podcasts afterwards, and you guys can watch that on the church website in the coming weeks. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to go away, and I want you to find every bank statement that you can find. And most of you go, a lot of you go, bank statements, what are they? Are they those things that, like, I just throw it in the mail, throw it in the bin as soon as it comes, and I don't even look at it? Some of you might actually, to do your bank statements, you actually may have to go to the bank and actually ask them, or you might need to log into online banking. Some of you need, look, without being particular and telling you have to do this, I think that if each of you could get to the point where you actually can access your finances online, it's a big plus. If you don't have online banking, could I encourage you to do what it takes to get it? It's not a whole lot of work. You can usually do it with a phone call to the bank. As long as you know your date of birth and your address, that's usually enough. And you can set up online banking over the phone. It helps if you know your date of birth, your name and address. If you don't know, well then I can't really help you. But if you know that much, you can set up online banking. And then you've got access to your finances. I want you to get a hold of your bank statements, because you really can't see what you're spending money on until you get your bank statement. And then I want you to take your major expenses that are listed in there, your utilities bills, and things like that. We all know that electricity is a major expense. So last quarter we hit the grand for the first time ever. We had $1,001.43 in our electricity bill. And we had hardly been using our spa. So we spent $1,000 and bought a gas heater, and already I reckon it probably you save that in like 12 months off our electricity bill. But it's going to take a little while to get there. But I want you to go away and actually, if you don't have your electricity bills, have a decent guess at what you spend. And put all that in a manila folder, okay? Start to get together a list of all your expenses and all your income. Did you do that for me? Because that's going to be part of the journey. Now, some of you, I know, have steady income, and some of your income's not steady. You're up and down or whatever. I want you to make some guesses. Then I'll unpack that a bit more in the blog. And my mission is to get us all to the point where together we're on a healthy spending plan. We're free from the burdens of worry about money. It's actually having a budget is not restrictive. It's actually very liberating. People say, well, if I have a budget, I won't be able to buy that stuff. It's kind of a stupid statement, really, isn't it? Because that means you're buying stuff that you can't afford to buy anyway. You look in your bank. If you're a person who looks at your bottom line in your bank account and says that's how much money I've got, you're kidding yourself. Because do you know that most of what you have in your bank account is already spent? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's actually allocated towards your car registration, which is due like next month. So do you know that 9 months, 10 months, 11 months of car registration is actually sitting in your bank account? And you think, I've got $3,500 in there. No, $1,000 of it's already set aside for your car registration. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's why I want us to get to that point where you don't actually look at your bottom line. You don't actually want to know how much money is in your bank account, because this is not how much you have to spend. And that's going to free us up. And if we can do that, I don't know if we could stand, we've finished. We won't even worry about getting the band back. I think we just close in prayer. Is this okay? It's going to be good for us. If you guys will put in the hard work yourself, then together we're going to make some progress. And for me, a win out of this series would be if we come back to preach this series, or a series like this, say 12 months' time, and we tackle the issue of money again in 12 months' time, and by then we'll have a lot more people in our church who haven't heard it the first time around. But if I could come to it in 12 months' time and be able to stand a whole lot of you up here and say, you know what, I've put some stuff into practice. We're not out of debt yet, but I feel so much freer. The pressure is off. If we're in that position, to me, that is a success. That is a tremendous success. You know, I wasn't able to give consistently, but I've been able to start giving online. I feel like I'm making a contribution. I'm not worried. I feel like I'm able to make a standard contribution to the house of God. That's a success. That makes people feel fulfilled and happy. Amen? Let's bow our heads and we'll close in prayer. Father, we pray that this word, this message would go in. We pray that we would get a handle on the fact that money actually does matter, that it really is important. If anyone has buried their head in the sand and tried to avoid the issue of money, that through this series, they would take a stance and say, money affects spirituality. The way I live my life and handle my money, the attitude towards my money affects my relationship with God. I'm determined that I'm going to make some changes that I need to make to get myself headed in the right direction. Lord, I pray that everyone in this situation would do that. Those that are in a position of financial affluence where the shortage of money is not the issue. I pray for those ones, Lord, that they wouldn't become lazy or haphazard about it, but they would see that if they're in a position where they are doing well financially, that you would call them to use their money wisely, to store up an inheritance for the next generation, that their children and their grandchildren would be blessed, that they wouldn't just spend everything they have, that they begin to set aside a plan, an intentional plan for saving, and that they would be able to be intentional and regular with their giving and their generosity so that the kingdom of heaven could advance. We thank you, Lord, that you are in this, you are helping us, and that together the church will prosper. In Jesus' name. Everybody said amen. Amen. Fantastic, guys. Thanks so much. Why don't you hang around, have some time at the cafe. I'll be around if you have any questions.